Evening, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us for another one of our Zoom talks. This is the first one I've done, so if it all goes horribly wrong, you'll know why. Anyway, for those of you who don't know me, a little bit about myself. I've been a guide for Speyside Wildlife for more years than I care to remember, but it's probably somewhere about 28 years now. I think 27, 28 years I've been guiding for Speyside. And in that time, I've done all sorts of trips, some of them foreign trips early on, and now mainly just specialise in Scotland, especially in the Highlands and Islands. I've done a lot of trips in Speyside in the past, where I might know quite a few people from. But as I say, generally now, I'm just covering the islands. So places like Shetland and Fair Isle, Orkney, of course, which I'm going to be touching on tonight. The Outer Hebrides, Mull, all sorts of places, but generally islands is the places that I tend to be taking people to these days. So sit back, relax, pour yourself a glass of something nice if you like, and hopefully I can keep you entertained for half an hour or so while we just have a flying visit through the wonders of Orkney. So this is the title screen here. As you can see, this is our group last year there, Ailey out on the right there, and the rest of the group, our intrepid group, all stood there in between the wonderful standing stones of Skara on Orkney. It's only when you're sort of standing up against some of these amazing megalithic monuments, you get an idea of just the scale of some of them. And then we're looking to the wonderful hills of Hoy there in the background. So that sort of encompasses, what we get up to on Orkney. We take in a lot of the historical sites, the archaeological sites. It's absolutely chock full of wonderful archaeology. Some of the best prehistoric archaeology anywhere in the world, I think. Of course, the area around Skara, where this photo is taken, is a World Heritage Site, so it's a very important place. And it's Orkney, as I say, is wonderful for wildlife as well. So often when you're visiting these monuments, you're literally watching the wildlife at the same time. So it's a great combination of things to see and do on Orkney when we're there in the week. And we go normally in September, so we're there sort of at the start of autumn. Of course, that's autumn migration. And it's just a really nice time of year to be there. So I'll crack on with some of the photos here anyway. I'll show you hopefully some of the things we get up to and the places we go to. So we get the ferry from Scrabster at the top of the north coast of Scotland, across from John O'Groats, and we get the short ferry across from Scrabster, which takes us over to the Orkney Isles. As we're going across the Pendleton Firth there, you come in around the side of the cliffs of Hoy, these huge cliffs, absolutely enormous red sandstone cliffs. And of course, you can't fail to notice the old man of Hoy as you come past. You get wonderful views as you cruise past on the ferry. It sort of towers above you, and it's your first real glimpse of what Orkney's all about, really. So it really is a spectacular column of red sandstone. How long it'll be standing for, we'll never know, I suppose. It could come down at any moment, I guess, but it's been there for quite a while now. And it's an incredible sight as you cruise in past on the ferry there. I'm going to just cover some of the prehistoric and the archaeological sites on Orkney first. And we're lucky to visit the main sites on Orkney, of which this is one of them. This is Maes Howe, which is this incredible Neolithic chambered tomb. It's probably one of the wonders of prehistoric Europe, and certainly I've never ever seen the inside of a tomb as incredible as this. It was built, at or before the time of the pyramids, so it gives you an idea of the age of these things. They're sort of over 5,500 years old. It's surrounded by a huge henge monument, which is this big bank and ditch you can see, and then this huge earthen mound was raised up over the tomb inside. And when we're there, we do a visit to Maes Howe, and we actually get to go inside the tomb, and it really is an amazing place. You have to crawl in, not quite on your hands and knees, but sort of stoop down to get along the passageway to get into the tomb itself. And when you get inside, this is the view that greets you. It's just an incredible place. There are four sort of standing stones, if you like, in each four corners of the inside of the tomb, and then you have these these sections where sort of chambers leading off them, leading into the tomb itself. And each one of those cells, if you like, we don't really know what was in there because there was very little found in Maes Howe when it was eventually excavated. So it was probably for funerary rites, I would imagine, but obviously for somebody very special, I would imagine, in the community at the time. And the dry stone walling you can see there, considering the age of it, as I say, 5,500 years old, it's just amazing. You can barely fit an envelope in between some of those slabs of rock. It's just a wonder that they managed to build all these monuments without any metal at all, just using stone and wood. It's just incredible. So as I say, we'll visit Maes Howe on the trip. It's often one of the highlights for people when you get inside. And of course, the other draw of Maes Howe is it has these wonderful Viking carved runes. It's basically Viking graffiti all around on the walls and decorating the slabs and things. So that's another interesting thing to look at when you're inside Maes Howe. But as I say, it really does take your breath away when you come inside this tomb. But as I say, we'll never really know what was inside it and who were using it. That's one of the mysteries of Maes Howe. We'll also get to visit this other wonder of prehistoric Orkney. This is Skara Brae. It's an amazing place, and it's perched right on the edge of the Bay of Scale, which is that lovely sweeping bay you can see there. And it's just the most amazing place. You look down and you've got these incredible structures. They're actually house structures. People were living here. It was an actual Neolithic village, and the houses are just so well preserved. They were all covered by sand, a huge sandstorm that covered Skara Brae, and then it was discovered. And it was basically, when they excavated it, it was as if people had just left the day before. There were items of jewellery left in some of these stone dressers. You can see there's a central hearth in most of the houses, and then you can see these stone square structures on the side here. Those are actually box beds where people would be sleeping. And then in the top right corner of the picture there, you can see that sort of curved dish-like stone. That's a quern stone where they would have been grinding corn and wheat. So just an amazing place, and it's such a beautiful spot as well, looking over the Bay of Scale. There's often birds along the beach as you look out from there. So it's just a very wild spot. And when you stare down into the houses, it's almost as if you can still see the people just sitting around the hearth there, as if they just left 5 minutes ago. And again, this dates to around about 5,000 years old, something like that. So an incredible span of time. And they had everything sorted at Skara Brae. The whole village was subterranean, and each of the houses is linked by a passageway linking each other's houses. So they didn't even have to go outside in the bad weather to go and see your neighbour. You could just pop along the passageway to next door if you like. So it was absolutely wonderful. And they even had their own drainage system, which runs under the whole village. So you didn't even have to go outside to do your ablutions. You could stay in the warmth of your house. Absolutely wonderful place. So that's Skara Brae, another place we visit on the trip. And of course, Orkney's world famous for its standing stone circles, and this is probably the best preserved of them all. This is the Ring of Brodgar. Huge standing stone circle surrounded by this enormous henge monument, which is cut out of the solid bedrock. When you see the ditch is almost as impressive as the standing stones themselves, because the ditch, as I say, is cut into this Orkney flagstone in the solid bedrock. Once you get down a couple of feet, you're basically hitting rock. And to excavate this huge henge ditch, which is meters deep, they only had antler picks, red deer antlers to prise out the rock, the bedrock, and ox shoulder blades probably to shovel them out, to form shovels, and then wicker baskets to move all those thousands of tons of spoil to create the henge monument itself. So it gives you a new light on these people. It makes you realise that they were really a sophisticated society at the time, to have the labour and the wherewithal to build these incredible monuments. There was nothing basic about the way they lived. They'd got living absolutely sorted because they had to have enough downtime in the season to be able to build these huge communal monuments. So you can only do that if you're fit and you're healthy and you've got enough time through the year out with growing crops and things to build these wonderful monuments. And of course, being a birder and a naturalist, looking at standing stones is one thing, but you can always see wildlife. I've endeavoured over the years of going to Orkney to try and see as many birds as I can sitting on top of standing stones on Orkney, just as a challenge. So here's a meadow pipit. We'll start with the easy ones. And then we're getting into the harder ones now. As a wheatear, these are all at the Ring of Broch. So as I say, when you're looking at the monuments, the birds are all around you at the same time often. And there's a personal favourite, this oyster catcher here at sunset at the Ring of Broch, sitting on top of one of the standing stones. I think they form a good lookout for some of the birds there that are nesting roundabouts. So moving on from the prehistoric archaeology of Orkney mainland, Orkney is surrounded by a wonderful, wonderful coastline. And this is the cliffs up at Yesnaby, really dramatic cliffs facing out into the wild Atlantic. And here's just a little taster of what it's like on an average day up there. This was taken last autumn. I say it's a brilliant spot at Yesnaby, and of course it's that pounding of the Atlantic Ocean there that makes these huge dramatic cliffs and ledges, which of course are so favoured by all of the seabirds that breed up there. Huge numbers of breeding fauna, and also the auk species, the guillemots and the razorbills and puffins and the like during the summer season. Of course, at the time of year we're visiting in September, a lot of those birds have already left the ledges, but faunas being very late breeders are often around and still in very good numbers, so you can get nice views of them out at Yesnaby as they're gliding around the cliff tops. And especially on a windy day, a bit like when I took that short clip, it's a perfect day to watch the faunas. They ride the updrafts that hit the cliffs and rise upwards, and often they can just be sort of eye level with you as they're sort of gliding along the top of the cliff ledges there, so they give you great views. It's a wonderful place for seeing the seabirds, and of course it's a great place for doing some sea watching generally. You're looking right out to the wild Atlantic there, so it's a great place to just stop and have a scan. We often set the telescopes up there and just have a look to see what might be passing, seeing as it's a real westerly headland. And it's often a very good place to see this species. This is Risso's dolphin. If you've never seen Risso's dolphin in Britain, the seas around Orkney are actually very good for them. We'll sometimes see them on the crossing across to Orkney from across the Pendant Firth there as we come across to Hoy and then up to Orkney mainland itself. That can be a good place to look out for Risso's dolphin. But the cliffs at Yesnaby and also up at Westray can be very good, and it's always worth keeping half an eye open for fins breaking the surface. So lovely species to see. Of course, very easy to identify Risso's dolphins. They often have these scars along these sort of wheels and scars along their flanks there. So they're quite an unusual looking species of cetacean, but quite obvious when you see them. And you'll sometimes get little pods of them coming past the headland there. So as I say, always worth keeping your eyes on the sea as well as the sky. And of course, the whole coastline around Orkney is heavily indented, and you're never very far from the coast. And of course, it forms a perfect habitat for species of seals like this common harbour seals here. These are three just taking it easy here as the tide's coming in. I always think seals have a very easy life, really. They don't seem to do very much most of the time. I think if you want to come back as an animal, coming back as a seal wouldn't be a bad choice. You get to spend most of the day asleep, it seems. Either that or you're doing Pilates on the beach. So, as I say, it's not a bad life being a harbour seal, common seal on Orkney. Although you probably have to keep half an eye open for killer whales, as they're a favourite food item, especially during the summer months. And of course, anywhere around the coast of Orkney, it's also worth keeping your eye out for otters. Orkney has a very healthy population of otters, and you'll often see them around the coast there. But half the problem with looking for otters on Orkney, a bit like Shetland, is that there's so much coastline and there's so many places otters can be. So even though there's a good population, you still need that little slice of luck to come across them. But if you don't actually pick them up around the coast, like this animal here that's just swimming in towards the shore, one of the better places on Orkney to look for them is the big areas of fresh water. So there are a couple of huge lochs on Orkney mainland, Loch of Harrier and Loch of Gurness. And that can be very good for otters there, and the sort of typical view you'll get of them just surfacing out on the loch there. And of course, they're feeding on different prey items to the coastal otters, the freshwater otters, and especially they'll be taking things like eels, like this animal was. So yeah, Orkney mainland and the bigger freshwater areas, the big lochs there, a good place to keep your eyes peeled for otters, and we often see them on our weeks up there. And of course, it's not just mammals that Orkney's brilliant for, it's birds and birds of prey particularly as well. And Orkney's a fabulous place to see hen harriers. The very healthy population of hen harriers there, occupying the moorland areas on the mainland especially, and down onto South Ronaldsay. Of course, it's getting later in the year, but we'll often still bump into one or two of these lovely grey male, beautiful male hen harriers at that time of year. Absolutely stunning birds with those ink black wing tips there and the beautiful ghostly grey, white upper parts, pale grey upper parts. They can almost look gull-like, I think, when you see them coming over the moorland. It's hard to believe it's a bird of prey when you see your first male hen harrier, especially in good light. But amazing looking birds, and as I say, there's no persecution on Orkney, so they thrive there and they do very well. The population is doing very well. And of course, the autumn as well is a great time to look for them because the young have fledged by then, so the population is boosted by all of this year's youngsters. So we're often seeing juvenile birds and females at this time of year. And of course, this is a sort of classic view of how you bump into hen harriers on Orkney. Often they're not over the moorland at that time of year, they're down on the lower ground and around the sort of crofting land and fields and farmland, because obviously there's a good population of small birds and rodents for them down there. So they tend to come down off the higher moors in the autumn and hunt around the coast and farm strips. But wonderful birds to see, and you can go out most days and come across several hen harriers when you're driving around on Orkney, and it's lovely to see them regularly. And they're really stunning birds. This is a juvenile, young bird, absolute stunners, just as nice as the males, I think. This is what you would call a ringtail hen harrier. So bird watchers generally just call them ringtails if they're not sure whether they're female or juvenile. But generally, the juveniles and the females look pretty much alike at this time of year. But that lovely white rump is the thing that really stands out, and that barred tail. Absolutely lovely birds, almost like an owl-like face, I always think, that hen harriers have got. And they'll core to the ground very low, slow, looking for small birds like pipits and things like that, not trying to flush the birds off the ground to try and snatch them. So, as I say, some days you can see quite a good number of harriers hunting around on the lower ground, especially when the weather's good. And of course, the other bird you look for on those lower moorland areas at this time of year is the short-eared owl. Absolutely beautiful birds with those fierce yellow eyes. And great place again to see short-eared owls, Orkney. They breed up there in reasonable numbers each year. And of course, in the autumn, you've got that year's youngsters as well around. So you're often bumping into short-eared owls while you're looking for hen harriers. Stunning birds, and you can get lovely views of them. Piercing yellow eyes are the thing that always stands out with short-eared owls, I think. And of course, merlins. There's a bird that always is dashing through, never seems to sit still for very long. And with so many small birds on Orkney, pipits and wheatears and things like that in the autumn, the merlins do very well. And you often see lots of merlins around on the island, so that they're always dashing through hunting normally. This bird was on Hoy, taking advantage of one of the passing places to come across in front of our vans. Lovely birds. That bird actually was quite unusually. There was a small loch just off to the left of where I took that photo, and it was hawking dragonflies, a bit like a hobby, if you've ever seen hobbies hawking dragonflies. And it's the only time I've ever seen merlins hawking for dragonflies like that. But this young bird was taking advantage of the ample food that was available, I suppose. So a dragonfly is not much different to a small bird if you're a merlin. So you might as well go for what you can get. And this is crossing over to Hoy now. You can see the dramatic light you get on the Orkney Isles during the autumn. You can get these squalls and showers coming through. So you get wonderful light at times. You know, 1 minute it could be raining, the next minute you've got beautiful bright blue skies and sunshine. So the weather plays a huge part in what you see and where you go. We plan our trips, you know, so that we'll visit islands, you know, that might be good. If we've got some easterly winds, we might hit other parts of the islands that might be dragging some migrant birds. So, as I say, the weather is an integral part of making your plans for the day. This is us just getting over to And Hoy's a fabulous place to visit. We always make a day to visit Hoy. It has some wonderful moorland areas and quite mountainous terrain compared to the rest of the Orkney Isles. And of course, you get some of the species there that you would find typically on moorland in the Northern Isles. Things like great skuas, they breed on Hoy in reasonable numbers as well. So if you haven't seen a great skua, we often see them when we get over to Hoy. And of course, one of the really good bits of news is that finally, after many years of being absent, white-tailed eagles are now breeding on Hoy. So that's another bird we often see when we're wandering around on Hoy. We get some good views of those, especially over the higher ground. You know, they're over the ridges and soaring around over the sort of ridged areas. This is a nice photo from I think it was a couple of years ago now. This is one of our guests here celebrating the fact that they've made it out to the famous Dwarfy Stone, as it's called, on Hoy, which is this amazing rock cut tomb. It's a solid slab of glacial rock. And back in sort of about 3000 BC, they think people actually carved out the inside of that solid rock to make a tomb, so you can actually go inside it. And there's two side cells at either end. We take a walk out across the moorland to get up to the Dwarfy Stone. And those ridges you can see behind there are often haunted eagles. We'll often get white-tailed eagles over those ridges there, maybe peregrine as well. But yeah, I quite like that photo there. Guests celebrating the walk in. And finally, at the end of the sort of road we get to, there's not many roads on Hoy, but the end of the road takes you down to this lovely bay called Rackwick Bay. And it's a fabulous place, just beautiful, stunning scenery. There's often seals in the bay there. We've seen otters there before, harriers and owls and things like that, just working the sort of low ground around the coast there. But here's a little clip just to give you a flavour of what Rackwick's all about. It's normally pretty deserted there, so you've normally got the whole of that bay and beach to yourselves when you get there. So it's a lovely place to have some lunch. We often sit there and take our lunch and just see what pops up in front of us while we're there. But very dramatic, very isolated little community down there at Rackwick. There's just one road that leads all the way in, and it leads through the mountains and through the moorland to get to the very end of the road there. And on a clear day, you can see right across back to the north coast of mainland Scotland from there as well. We also visit an island called Westray on the trip. So we get out and about on Orkney, make sure we call in at some of the other islands that make up the whole group. And the day over to Westray is one of my favourite days. It's an early start, so you have to get up very early, sort of just before dawn or around about dawn, to head from the hotel down to Kirkwall to get the ferry. And this is us just heading out on the first boat of the day over to Westray. And Westray, one of the reasons we go to Westray is it's a fantastic place, especially for wading birds. And when we were on the ferry going to Westray a few years ago, we were joined by this turnstone, believe it or not, when we were still about 30, 40 minutes out from landing on the island. Turnstone flew alongside the boat for quite a way and then plonked itself down right on the end of the ramp that's at the front of the ferry. That's the wing mirror of one of our vans there. And hitched a ride for the last 30 minutes or so before we got into the pier, and was just wandering up and down just a few yards away from us. And then as soon as we got in towards shore, off it went. So it just hitched an easy trip for the last sort of 30 minutes. And there are very good areas of fresh water on Westray, and they can pick up huge numbers of passage waders. I would say it's probably the most birdie island we go to on the week, actually, Westray. And you can get these very big flocks of passage waders. This is mostly black-tailed godwits, and we've got dunlin and also some knot in there as well. You can also find some of the scarcer waders at that time. You get things like curlew sandpiper and little stints as well. So it's a great place to do some birding there. Have a scan through the huge flocks of waders that you can get and try and pick out something a bit more unusual. These are black-tailed godwits. Great views. This whole of this flock got up at one point because a peregrine came through hunting. So the whole flock, this big flock, mixed flock of waders, were up circling around the pools for quite a while until they settled back down again. Just lovely, lovely views. It's a classic time, September, for waders to be on the move. I'd say it's probably sort of peak migration for most wader species, September. Pretty much everything, if you're a wader, is on the move at that time of year. So most of these have been breeding up in the Arctic, way further south at the moment. Some of them even heading down as far as West Africa to spend the winter. And lovely flocks of knot as well. This is mainly knot in this group, not warbled, I think. So some great birding there to be had on Westray. And even in the fields, you'll get birds like ruff. It's a classic juvenile ruff in juvenile plumage in September. And most of the waders, funnily enough, tend to favour the freshly cut fields, the ones that have just been cut for silage and haylage. Those are the fields you need to check for passage waders. They'll be feeding on all the various sort of invertebrates there, things like leather jackets and things in September. So it's a great place. Any of the cut fields are worth a stop and a scan. You get these lovely ruff in there sometimes. They're often mixed in with golden plover when you come across the flocks of ruff. There's a golden plover there, for example. Stunning birds with that lovely spangled plumage. I always think golden plover is one of our most attractive wading birds. Get big flocks as well and wheel around. Get that contrast between the black and the dark upwing and the white underwing. As they wheel around, they often will twist in flight and get that wonderful sort of almost like a sort of a spangled effect in the sky as the light catches the bellies of the birds. And of course, really good flocks of waders like curlew. It's a great place to see curlew. A lot of them at this time of year are post-breeding birds, so they've got a few gaps in their wings where they're molting their feathers. But there's a very, very healthy population of curlew in Orkney. It's just great to see them breeding in the flower-rich meadows of Orkney, because as you know, they've gone from large areas of lowland Britain now. So Orkney's the place to go if you want to see good numbers of breeding curlews. Probably one of the most important places in the UK, I would say, for them as a breeding species. Maybe that and the Outer Hebrides and maybe Shetland. Very important places for our curlew. And snipe as well, beautiful birds. You can often get really good views of the snipe in the fields and the wet ditches. And of course, this time of year, September on Orkney, there's large numbers of passage snipe that are coming down from places like the Faroe Islands and Iceland. So often you'll be walking around the coast and they'll often come up just off the rocks on the actual very rocky shores. They're sort of feeding around the sort of seaweed and things. It's not the kind of place you generally expect to see snipe, but that seems to be where they are in the autumn, actually right on the coast. And this is where we eventually end up when we go to Westray. This is the wonderful spot of Newp Head, very remote and wild spot. The track's quite interesting on the drive out there. You can see our minibuses down up to the right of the lighthouse there, but you end up at this wonderful spot with these huge cliffs, and you really are out in the wilds there when you get out to the head at Newp Head, looking out to sea there. You just never quite know what you're going to see from the headland there. You could be looking, maybe get passing cetaceans, maybe if you were very lucky, killer whales or something like that. But there's often skuas and late seabirds passing even in September. And the cliffs there are actually a very good place for breeding gannets. And a bit like fulmars, the gannets are quite late when they breed. So they're often still around the cliffs there, either on the ledges with some late young or riding the updrafts like this bird. You get lovely views of the gannets even in September. So we often take a walk out along the top of the cliffs there, and you can get a great view looking back towards the lighthouse and watch the birds riding the updrafts just underneath you. And of course, the bigger freshwater lochs, especially on the moorland of mainland Orkney, are a great haunt for red-throated divers. And we do see them very regularly on trips in September. If we're not picking up some late birds that are still up on the moors, then we're often picking them up around the coast, because that's when they tend to go sort of by the end of sort of September. They're moving around, they're becoming more coastal birds. And we can often get good groups, sometimes 5 or 6 red-throated divers together on some of the more calm and sheltered bays around mainland. Beautiful birds though, that's great to see them. And of course, the other reason we go in September is you're reaching the sort of height of bird migration. So lots of birds on the move, thousands and thousands of birds on the move every day. And every day is different. You never quite know what you're going to find or what you're going to see. So it can be just the commoner migrants, things like wheatear like this and a meadowpipit there for company. This is actually at one of the Brochs, the Iron Age Brochs that we visit, Broch Gurness. And this is a couple of passage birds just using some of the walls of the old Broch to rest up on. And of course, around the beaches there, you'll come across birds like white wagtails. They tend to favour the beaches and the strand lines where all the insects are and those sort of rotting kelp and seaweed. So good numbers of passage white wagtails like this young bird here, looking very smart in its autumn plumage. And those would be birds that are coming down from Iceland and heading back to as far as sort of West Africa to winter. So they've got a long way to go. And of course, especially the tide line there is a great place to look for sandling. They're juvenile birds like this. They're really sort of black silver spangles on the back. They're absolutely stunning little things. The young sandling at that time of year, they're often busy scurrying around on the tide line, right down on the shore's edge. But if you're very lucky and the winds are in the east, you might find something a bit more unusual. This is a beautiful juvenile redback shrike that I found one autumn a few years ago when we were running the trip. Just any little patches of cover really are worth checking for birds. You never quite know what's going to pop out. And when this hopped out on the fence, that was certainly a fist pump moment. It was a top bird to find. So gorgeous, gorgeous little juvenile redback shrike. That's probably come from Scandinavia. It's crossed the North Sea. They'll be heading down to tropical West Africa, Southern Africa to spend the winter. So especially if the winds switch easterly, any sort of easterly component, you get a day where it's a little bit misty and a bit murky and the winds drop and it turns easterly. You can feel the excitement if you're a birder looking for unusual birds, because any little patch of cover, you might be staring at a redback shrike. Often it's more commoner drift migrants, as they're called, in the autumn, like this beautiful little pied flycatcher. They'll turn up just literally anywhere. They're just a clump of nettles, a patch of docks. They don't need much cover, small birds. As long as there's some shelter and there's some food there for them, that's all they require. So it can be quite exciting birding in the autumn, especially in the Northern Isles, because you can come across some real delights. And the hotel we stay at is a wonderful hotel called the Mercaster Hotel. It's right on the shores of one of the bigger lochs, Loch Harry, and it's an absolutely beautiful spot to be based. This is the view literally right out the front of the hotel, so you're literally a few yards from the edge of the loch. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful place to just have wander after dinner or before breakfast, just down and around the loch there. There's loads of wildlife to be seen, just right on the doorstep. Here's just a little taster of what it's like in the evening. What a wonderful place it is, just beautifully quiet, just the sounds of the wildlife, the birds, the curlews. And of course, the other wondrous thing about Orkney is the landscape. Whether you're around the coast or you're around lofty land, or on cliffs, or travelling to a small island, it's just a wonderful, wonderful place. And one of the amazing things about Orkney, I always think, is the light. It's always changing in Orkney, especially in the autumn. You can get wonderful, wonderful light. If you were an artist, you'd be making hay there. Beautiful, beautiful landscape to be painting or drawing or photography. And this particular week was last year actually with Ailey. Had the most amazing day for rainbows I think I've ever had. I've never seen a day like it for rainbows. We were bumping across rainbows all day long. We've got double rainbows like this. We actually had two rainbows crossing in the middle, which I've never seen before. But it was just an amazing day of weather. We just sort of lapped it up really. It was just stunning. You've got that lovely, wonderful, soft Orcadian landscape as well. So just an amazing place to be when everything conspires just right like this. And even the rainbows looking out to sea were pretty special. And of course, you always try to get a rainbow with a standing stone as well. Unfortunately, there wasn't a bird sat on the top of that, and that was at the Ring of Broch. But as I say, it really is a wonderful place, and for me, it's as much about the wildlife and everything. It's the light and the landscape that really leaves an impression when you go to Orkney. It's always changing. There's a little black guinea up here just swimming through. Just incredible light. Never short of things to look at on Orkney. And if you're very lucky, you might even get to see the Northern Lights. This was September actually, some years ago. We were lucky enough to have a show of the Northern Lights as well. So the nights are drawing in by September, so the skies are getting darker, and you just need that bit of a slice of luck to get the magic happening with the Northern Lights. But you never know. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the talk this evening as much as these two fawners obviously have. And with that, I'll hand you back to Ailey. And thank you very much for joining us this evening for the talk about Orkney. If you're interested in going to Orkney, just let the office know. We'll be running trips to Orkney next year as well. So just give us a call or drop us a line. And if anybody's got any questions, feel free.